giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dawgs. This is On the Beat, presented by Ingles with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
Happy Labor Day to you, Cody Chaffins, Mike Griffith with you on the beat. And Mike, it's a holiday, but here we are, putting in the work.
Well, no doubt. The Dawgs put in the work Saturday, and there's a lot to talk about, Cody. I can't wait to break this game down.
Yeah, so much to talk about from Saturday's game. We are going to hit some of the things that we were looking at. Again, we were coming in with a very critical eye looking at this game. We'll talk about that. We've also got our first edition of the season of Mike's 30,000-foot view. A lot to talk about around the SEC this week. And also share my boots on the ground, some pictures that you probably didn't see on the TV broadcast that I got to get from the sidelines. And I'll share that with you and some really interesting stuff there as well. We're also going to hit our old friend by the end of the show. We'll tell you more about that when we get there. But when we just start off today, we talked last week on this show about what we would be watching for, and we were going to have a very critical eye. It wasn't about if Georgia beat Marshall. Georgia was going to beat Marshall, and the Dogs pull out the 45-7 win, and I think a lot of Dog fans feeling good about some of the new pieces that we got to see. We got to see some guys we'd only heard about play football a little bit, and everybody can also say, hey, at least we ain't Alabama. At least we ain't Texas. But it's not all sunshines and rainbows. As you know, we're going to watch it with a very critical eye, Mike.
Well, yeah, I mean, critical analysis is part of the job. And, you know, when it's Georgia, and this is a team that's a championship contender, you're measuring everything on championship standards. So when we talk about critical analysis, yeah, Georgia's going to be better than 90% of the teams, period. But when we talk about the teams that win championships and we measure this Georgia team against past Georgia teams, and we know Kirby's standards, we know that behind the scenes, he's even more hypercritical than we are. Now, he's not going to say these things publicly, but we can only analyze what we see. And the fact is, what we really had seen before this wasn't much. We saw a G-Day game, and we heard reports from a scrimmage. So there was a lot learned in this game, a lot of good, a lot of bad, and a lot of questions that Kirby and his staff are going to have to answer before they play Tennessee. That is a losable football game, Cody.
It definitely feels that way after this weekend. When you look at, you know, the first thing we talked about on the show was going to be Gunnar Stockton. What were we going to watch this week? It was Gunnar Stockton. We finally got to see a home debut. Second full game for Gunnar Stockton, of course, came in the second half of that Texas game. Gunnar finishes off 4 touchdowns, ran for 2, threw for 2, 14 to 24, 190 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also led the team in rushing with 73 rushing yards. What was your analysis of Gunnar Stockton game 1, 2025?
Well, aesthetically, it looks pretty. Just like if you look on the scoreboard, 45-7 looks really good, okay? And again, if critical analysis isn't your thing, then you know, you may not like what I'm about to say. But there's a harsh reality to the first half of that football game. Georgia punted on 3 of its first 6 drives against a team that had 78 guys that went in the portal. But even if you want to give Marshall credit and say, well, they brought in some good guys. They played really hard. Kirby didn't want to show much. Okay. Georgia punted on 3 of its first 6 drives. The Bulldogs scored on their first 2 drives. You go, well, that's great. They needed 4th down conversions on both of those drives to sustain those drives for touchdowns. Cody, if that's Tennessee, if that's Auburn, if that's Florida, Kirby's not going for it on 4th down in the first quarter of a scoreless game.
Yep.
He's kicking a field goal. And he's probably not going for it up 3-0 in the second quarter or the first quarter. He's kicking a field goal. So essentially, you had 2 field goal drives. Unless you're confident that Gunnar Stockton can break tackles against an SEC defense, and that an SEC defense is going to blow an assignment and not cover the quarterback, which is what happened for Marshall, those drives would have been field goal drives. And then you think about Georgia's 3rd touchdown, they blocked a punt. And we know that Georgia has great special teams, but I don't think you're going to see a lot of blocked punts. So when you look at Georgia's first 3 touchdowns, you got to kind of put an asterisk next to that and say, boy, they needed 4th down conversions to get touchdowns. They needed a 20-yard field goal to drive. And then, of course, they kicked the field goal at the end of the first half. So what I'm suggesting is if that's an SEC team, that Gunnar did not lead Georgia on a conventional touchdown drive. Now, he did it. He executed in the clutch, and who knows, maybe it's going to be 4th down Kirby Smart this year. But what I would suggest to you is that the same issues that we saw in the spring game when Georgia needed a 4th down conversion to score a touchdown in the first half are still a part of this Georgia offense. It grinds down the field. It doesn't glide down the field. Now, part of this is probably scheme, and part of it is part of game plan. And Cody, I don't know about you, but that ball didn't go very far downfield. I think the longest air yards was about 24 yards to Delp. Other than that, it was a lot of quick passes. I mean, Zachariah Branch had 96 yards receiving. Well, 2 of the 3 catches he made were behind the line of scrimmage, and he did the rest. So, what we're starting to see is what Georgia is comfortable with Gunnar Stockton doing, or maybe what they're comfortable with showing at this point. So not saying he can't do it, but they didn't really give him the opportunity to push the ball downfield, or he chose not to push the ball downfield.
And that's kind of the question that you have. Like, some of the coverage or the blocking was breaking down at times, and he was on the run. And did he have more time? Did he decide to take off prematurely? He, after the game, said, "I'm never looking for the chance to run. I just kind of have to do what they do." Now, the one thing that kind of stuck with me as I watched that game, I said, this looks like Gunnar Stockton from Raven County, right? Like, he was just running all over the place and running over people. And I think, that was great on Saturday. But like you said, he ain't playing Towns County in 2 weeks, right? Like, the competition is going to be way different when it's Tennessee. And Kirby Smart admitted as much after the game. He said, yeah, he had a safety dead to rights had him, and he just made the man miss. That ain't going to happen when you get in the Southeastern Conference. So it's going to be a very different kind of thing. Although Gunnar, again, looked very much like I'd seen Gunnar play before. I do wonder, there was just a couple just straight up option, right, that they were running with Gunnar. You feel like some of that stuff's going to stick in the playbook as they move on?
Yeah, I think some of it will, but I don't think we're going to see double-digit carries. Let me point out something else, too, because perception becomes reality quickly. Juan Gaston, we know he left the game early with an ankle injury, was going to undergo an MRI. I'm sure Kirby will tell us a little bit more about that later this week. There's a lot of clips of Juan Gaston mashing defenders in run blocking, particularly one where he pulls and knocks out a linebacker, it appears. Per PFF metrics, now Kirby and his staff have their own grades, but Pro Football Focus also grades this film. Juan Gaston had by far the lowest pass blocking grade. So there were some issues with the freshman's pass blocking. Now, this is to be expected when you have a new player, but we're talking about a 21.9 pass blocking grade. So some of the times that you saw Gunnar Stockton, and I haven't gone back and studied the film, but with this 21.9 grade, when I think Ethan Barbar had a 36.5, everybody else was 50 or above. Riddell 51.1, most of the linemen 70 or above. The freshman had some issues in pass blocking, and I think that's something to take note of as we look at more elite teams that are going to be on Georgia's schedule.
Yeah, and we'll get more information. Again, the reason we're kind of doing the show, we did the show from Athens last week. We're hoping to do it this week the same way, but Kirby Smart has postponed his weekly Monday press conference, so that's why I'm not in Athens with Mike today. But we'll get more from Kirby about Juan Gaston's situation moving forward. But like you said, he's got room to grow that dancing bear. He needs to be out there on 2 good feet if he's going to be moving around blocking folks. So we talked about Gunnar Stockton, one of the things we wanted to watch. The other question a lot of folks had was this running back situation. What would it look like during the game? Well, Dwight Phillips scores the first touchdown of the year for these Georgia Bulldogs. The running game, you had 9 different players run the ball. That includes Puglisi and Gunnar Stockton. Dwight Phillips, 5 for 60 in the touchdown. Nate Frazier, only 4.3 yards per carry. Not a huge day for Nate Frazier.
Well, more concerning is he got stopped on a 3rd and 1 against Marshall. Again, you've got to qualify this. I mean, that's Marshall. And I know they got players too, but that's not an SEC team. That is a completely made over team with a brand new head coach. And it's alarming to me that when Georgia tried to run the ball in 3rd and 3 situations or less with their starting offense, it was 4 times. They failed 3 out of 4 times. It didn't matter whether it was Cash Jones. It didn't matter whether it was Frazier. I think Gunnar got stuffed once too, and Gunnar converted once. They did convert some 4th down runs. But again, these are plays that I don't think get called against an SEC. I don't think you're going for it, at least not often, and certainly not with a game in the balance in the first quarter, not with the kind of defense Georgia has. So alarming to me that Georgia struggled in short yardage situations with this new starting offensive line. Now, later in the game, Josh McCray came in and converted with a second team offensive line, either against a bunch of tired Marshall guys or backup Marshall guys. I'm not sure who was in for them in the 4th quarter, but Point being, there's work to be done. And you said it, they played 9 guys. At some point, you've got to have a hierarchy and a little bit of a rhythm as to who's in the game, when they're in the game, what you're trying to do with these guys. You can't play this many guys every game. And again, Kirby's got to use this as a scrimmage. He'll do the same thing against Austin Peay. But we've got to figure out who's who. I thought it was great that Dwight Phillips showed the flash that he did, able to turn the corner. He's a smaller guy. I think he's up to about 185, but you saw the burst. He's got home run speed. This is something you've got to have. You need more playmakers in this offense. Frazier is trying to run more north and south. We know he's got wiggle. We know he's got bounce, but I think in this game he wanted to show his coaches that he could run with more authority and behind his pads. I thought for the most part he did that. But the big red flag to me was not being able to pick up 3rd and 1 against Marshall.
Yeah, Georgia ended up 3 of 3 on 4th downs, but you talked about them. So one was on the first drive on a 4th and short, which I totally agree. First drive, you're just trying to get points on the board. You're not doing that unless you're playing Marshall when you know you're probably going to be able to convert. The other 2 4th downs resulted in touchdowns. The first Gunnar Stockton run, and then the 4th and goal when they were down there and it hit London Humphrey for the touchdown. Again, those situations just are not going to be those situations. Maybe if you get late in the game, you're going to go for it on 4th down, but you're not going to go for it on 4th down. Just trying to get points and get the 3-0 lead on a team.
And let me say this. So, it's not completely glass half full. I mean, I like that Kirby went for it. I like that he brought fire and passion and energy for the first 3 quarters at least. And it was good to see aggressive play calling. I know one of those plays didn't work. I know Bobo called an end around and they got dropped for 6 yards on a 6-yard loss. That's disappointing that they can't block that properly. But Cody, these are the sorts of wrinkles that new teams have to work out. And thank goodness that Georgia didn't play at Ohio State or play at Clemson or play, a marquee opponent. This team would not have been ready for that. That's not to say this team won't be ready for that. This is a team that is going to grow by leaps and bounds and get better and better and better, especially offensively. There's so much more improvement that can be made once these wrinkles get ironed out. But they needed a game like this. They needed all of these warts to be exposed, right? You don't know what you don't know. And now Kirby knows it. He's given a lot of kids opportunities that have worked hard. He's been able to see where his team needs work. This film is invaluable to them. Marshall did a nice job being a good scout team. It's maybe too good of a job in the 4th quarter. They outgained Georgia by 50 yards, and they kind of left with their heads held high, Cody. I mean, listening to the Marshall coach, they say, yeah, well, after the first 15 minutes, we really kind of settled in. They felt pretty good about how – so you always try to get – it's always interesting to hear how the opposing team talks after they play Georgia and where their headspace is at. And I think they left feeling pretty relieved that they had some momentum, that they did not get shut out, that they did hit some big plays. They hit more big pass plays downfield than Georgia did. And they were able to go toe-to-toe in the trenches and not get blown out and hold an SEC offense on some 3rd and short situations. There's something to build on there for Coach Gibson.
Yeah, I kind of lean, especially offensive line. I leave it to PFF to kind of break down some of that for me because I'm not an expert. I played offensive line, but not at this level by any means. And so you look at some of those grades. And then also, today on DawgNation Daily, John Stinchcomb comes on, right? Guy who's played in the NFL, did it at the highest level at Georgia as well. And he seemed very underwhelmed by the offensive line play for Georgia. Yes, I do think that Juan Gaston viral clip of him blowing up the much smaller guy has gotten some play. I saw Cole Kublik tweeted that out. But it's like, you got to hit. I also watched quite a few other plays where he blocked nobody. Like he pulled and he was just wandering. And so some of those things you can't do. And I think it is one of those things. Offensive lines, of course, always get better as they play together more. And that's why we had such high expectations for the offensive line a year ago. But this offensive line has got to play together a little bit. And not everybody graded out. Michael Uni had a very solid game, at least according to those PFF grades. So some of those guys had solid games, but there's definitely room to grow. Now, you talked about Dwight Phillips. He kind of burst open for that long touchdown there. He seems like a guy who's going to be fun to watch this year. I think Zachariah Branch, you talked about the 3 for 95, but 2 of them were just those little short behind the line of scrimmage things. That gets you excited. You see a playmaker right there. Some of those Mike Bobo, not another screen pass, is not another screen pass when you're throwing it to Zachariah Branch. Granted, against Marshall. But beyond maybe Dwight Phillips and Zachariah Branch, there wasn't another offensive star that really said, wow, to me on Saturday.
Yeah, and I think that was by design, just to be clear. And again, I want to double down on this because I know Georgia fans are excited about this team, and we're kind of throwing water on it, saying, "Yeah, bud," and maybe you didn't see this. Think about the position Georgia football is in, and the elite program that it is, and the expectations that Kirby's built. And this is the standard now. There was a time when if Georgia won 9 or 10 games, it was a pretty good season, and now it's, boy, if they don't win the SEC championship and make it to the national title game, it sure would be disappointing. So all we're doing when we break this down is we're echoing the things that we've heard over Kirby Smart over the years in terms of the standards that he set. And we need to know and understand what that G means. And it means excellence and it means execution. And Kirby told us, Cody, that with 54% of the roster being first or second year guys, he'd never had an overload like this. We knew they had a good spring. They brought a lot of guys in early. We knew a lot of work had been done, but we knew that they would be tested. We didn't maybe expect it to be this much of a test against Marshall, certainly not in the trenches, not I. And then as far as the playmakers, to your point, I do think that Gunner throws a very good fade pass, and a fade is pretty much a fly down the sideline where he airs it out. It's not exactly a 50-50 ball. It may look like that, but I don't call it a 50-50 ball because the defense doesn't know where it's going. If it's a jump ball Hail Mary, that's a 50-50. But to me, when you throw a fade pass and the defender's running with his back to the line of scrimmage and he's not sure when the ball's going to arrive, if the receiver does a nice job making sure that he doesn't telegraph it, that's more than a 50. That's an 80-20. But they didn't throw that pass. Now, we know that's in Gunner's arsenal. We know Noah Thomas can go up and get it. He didn't have a catch in this game. We know Colby Young can get up and get it. His catch was more of a stem route. We know that they have some explosive receivers. CJ Wiley, did some things in some scrimmage. We know that's in their arsenal, but they're not going to show it, and they're not going to throw those types of passes against Marshall because they want to work on the throws that Gunner's going to have to make. In addition to those fade routes, he's got to throw that intermediate pass. He's got to throw that timing pass. He's got to find that receiver in the progressions. We didn't see Jaden Riddell. We know he's a weapon at tight end. All right, we understand he's going to get the ball some this year, and he's going to be a playmaker. We know that Cash Jones can run some routes out of the backfield. We didn't see that. So there were a lot of things that I think Georgia has in their back pocket that they feel really good about, that they're not going to spring until they play Tennessee or they play Alabama, depending on the matchup and what they see. And a lot of this also has to do with how the defense plays you. Gunner is coached up to take what the defense gives him. There are certain places he's supposed to go with the ball based on the look. So this isn't all, Gunner Stockton's afraid to throw it down. No, if it's not there, if the read's not there, he's going to check down and go to Branch. And it's also not all Mike Bobo. This is a Kirby Smart offense. We've got to stop saying Mike Bobo because Kirby Smart runs the show. And if Mike Bobo was playing for Steve Sarkisian, well, this week would be a bad example. But if he was an offensive coordinator for an offensive-minded coach, or if he was an offensive coordinator on a team that didn't have perhaps the best defense in the country, he'd be calling a different game. But the head coach goes in there and makes sure that the game plan matches. Hey, the defense isn't going to give up many points today, so let's make sure we don't turn it over. Let's not throw too many deep passes. Let's not drop Gunner deep and put him in any perilous situations where he could have a catastrophic strip sack like Notre Dame last year. Let's protect our quarterback. Let's give him some confidence in this first game. This is what we're trying to achieve. So it's not, boy, Mike Bobo just can't draw up places. He can. But there is a game plan here of complementary football that the head coach is dictating, and Mike Bobo has to work within those constraints.
Yeah, I think that's something really important because those offensive drives, you can see Kirby. He is on that mic the whole time, and he ain't talking defense. He's telling those guys kind of what he wants to do in a lot of those drives. Now, you talked about, Noah Thomas gets one target, Colby Young. I think those guys, there were times where I'm like, just throw it up to him. Just throw it up to him. And we did see Lawson Lucky Drew a pass interference or a holding on a play that he was going to make there. So that was a longer ball that could have been done. The only thing I do worry about is because I feel like all of last year, early in the season, leading up to this Bama game. We said, oh, they got stuff they're hiding. They're not showing them who they are, and they're hiding all this stuff, and they're going to have a whole new thing, and it's going to be totally different when they play Alabama. But I feel like it never felt like it was totally different, or in that aha moment of here's the whole rest of the playbook that we'd been hiding from you. I do want to see some guys make some big plays like we saw Zachariah Branch. Like, I do want to see that against Austin Peay. I know it may not be the exact route that he's going to run for whatever, but I want to see a playmaker make a play even on a basic route.
Well, remember they opened last year against Clemson, and that was a 6-0 or 6-3 game at halftime, as I recall, Cody. I mean, that was a knockdown, drag-out game for 30 minutes. Clemson played Georgia even. So that was not a game to play with. That was not a game to worry about, oh, let's make sure, little Joe gets his snaps in this game. That was we got to win this game. This is going to have playoff ramifications. So completely different scenario when you open against Marshall and Austin Peay. It's a luxury. And it's a luxury that this Georgia team needs with an inexperienced quarterback and kind of a new look offense. Now, to be clear, all these plays have always been in the playbook. It's not like Georgia's like, oh boy, we got to go out and drop. All these plays are there, but different quarterbacks have different strengths. And think about Stetson Bennett 2021 versus Stetson Bennett 2022. Todd Monken was able to build a playbook around Stetson Bennett's strengths in 2022, utilize the quarterback run more, roll the pocket. He had seen enough of what Stetson could do in 20 and couldn't do in 20. Stetson was not good at the intermediate pass. He's mastered that in the NFL in year 3 now. He's gotten better at staying in the pocket, but that was not him in college. And 2021 was certainly not him. I think Mike Bobo is still learning some Gunnar Stockton. Now, he's had a lot of practices and scrimmages to work with against an elite defense. A lot of times in those scrimmages when we heard the offense wasn't getting the ball in the end zone, well, Gunnar Stockton wasn't running in the end zone on the Georgia defense. That is the intangible that Gunnar brings to the offense, is the ability to run the ball and the knack for being able to make some nice runs. Now, the question is, and we brought it up at the top of the show, is it realistic to think that Gunnar Stockton is going to be this effective running the ball throughout the season? And if not, then what tool does Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart pull out of the toolbox? What options other than quick pass to Zachariah Branch do you got? Who is the go-to guy? I mean, I said it before, the Georgia offenses under Kirby Smart have been very chameleon-like. They change from game to game depending on the opponent. Georgia's got a lot of talent, and they know that they can exploit different matchups because they feel good about all their guys. And depending on who they play, it's a different game plan. Well, when you have multiple weapons like Ladd McConkey, James Cook, and Brock Bowers, pick your poison. One of those guys is going to beat you, right? Right now, we're saying Zachariah Branch and so who are the other guys that you brought this up earlier? Who are the other guys that can put some teeth in this chameleon offense that Kirby likes to run that exploits defensive alignments? At some point, and maybe this year, you got to pick out your guys and find a way to get him the ball, because I don't know if you have the amount of explosive players yet, and you might. They could be freshmen, or maybe they haven't emerged. Dwight Phillips was a nice surprise. I don't know that you have the same sort of explosive players that you did that Stetson Bennett had to operate with. And I'll throw this caveat in there, Stetson Bennett himself was an explosive player running the ball. I don't know that I would describe Gunnar as explosive so much as maybe efficient.
Yeah, he was very effective. The one thing I will say too about Gunnar that coming out in some straight option looks, I can just remember how much Kirby Smart loathed getting ready for an option team and how he hated having to prepare, because it's just one whole extra thing you got to worry about and get the assignments right and you got to work on all week. So I do like that is out there. And now Tennessee is all of a sudden, we got to have this whole game plan. We got to spend a whole period working on this week instead of some of the other stuff. And I do think
here's the thing though, Cody, you were an offensive lineman, which explains why you're such an incredible teammate and why everyone loves you on DawgNation and in the Georgia fan base. I was a running back. I'm better with the ball in my hands. I bring it up because you mentioned 9 running backs playing. And yes, it does make the defense prepare for the option, but Gunnar had better have some pretty incredible timing with his running backs. And if you're shuffling that many guys in and out, now they're not going to run 9, but even if you're using 3 or 4, that is a very difficult timing play to make the option pitch, especially when you're talking about different running backs of different shapes, sizes, and speeds.
Right, and we didn't see any very much of the big guys. Hoping to see more of those, Josh McCray and Roderick Robinson, moving forward. I'm going to wrap this up quickly because one of the other things we talked about, we mentioned kind of the guard battle in Juan Gaston, what we were watching on last week's show. The other thing we mentioned was the safety battle, so I will give you an update. Kyron Jones ends up getting the start at free safety for Georgia, played 16 snaps. Aguero played 35 snaps, played a lot for a guy who at some points people thought might be hurt, but he played a lot. Adrian Maddox, 27 snaps. Ja'Cory Thomas, 18 snaps there at safety. So it looks like that is still going to be unsettled as we move through Austin Peay and we get ready for next week as well. So those are all the things we had our kind of critical eyes on in week one. Anything else stick out to you?
Yeah, I want to weigh this in. I want to go back to these PFF grades again and point out Zachariah Branch. Now, this guy only had 12 snaps, but he made 7 tackles. And he had, I believe, the highest
Zion Branch. Yep.
Yeah, excuse me, Zion Branch. He only played 12 snaps, but he had 7 tackles. Very high tackling grade. I think the highest tackling grade on defense. That speaks well. I don't know about his pass coverage, but it was definitely interesting to see that Adrian Maddox had a poor tackling grade. So these are things that Kirby Smart and his staff are going to break down. They're going to look at carefully. I don't know the situations. I mean, a lot of times there's certain situations. Who was he trying to tackle? Was it a guy that he was supposed to get? Was it a guy who's in run support on? But as a general rule, those PFF grades can be somewhat accurate and give you some guidance. But I don't think there's any question that Zion Branch had a very strong audition at the safety position.
Yeah, so look forward to seeing what he can do, building on that moving forward. If it will be just one guy who we see in there playing a whole lot more. All right, we got something to get to. We're going to talk about one other thing that was a key for Kirby Smart on Saturday. How did that go? Also have an injury update and a cool moment after the game. All of that still to come. It's On the Beat, presented by Ingles.
And it's the first title in team history. Here it is. And lightning strikes twice, back-to-back championships. 3 in a row. They've done it again.
Where did those cheese come from? Relax. They're from Ingles.
Can I eat this now?
Nothing I like more than tailgate food season. Love getting into that. All right. So one of the special things we do on the beat each and every week, especially during the season, I get to be on the sidelines during all of these games. I get to kind of watch and see some things that don't make the big broadcast, or even if you're in the stadium, you may not catch them. So I like to share each of those moments with you every week in a segment we call Boots on the Ground. All right, so the first one of these, we kind of talked about having a critical eye looking at this game. And one of the moments that I think Kirby Smart really wanted to work on, he wanted to zero in on. We saw him at the end of the first half calling timeouts so he could get his team back on the field so they could run a 2-minute drill. Colby Young gets tackled inbounds on like the second play of that 2-minute drill, and he really needed him to get out of bounds. It was interesting to watch. A Marshall player, they kind of got lucky because a Marshall player got hurt to stop the clock. But Kirby was right over there with Colby Young talking about, hey, man, you got to get out of bounds. He's giving all the pointers here. The 2-minute drill is something that, again, they'll be able to work on this week. As we kind of treat the first 2 weeks like a scrimmage, that's one of those things that you want to get right. So they started on the 31 with no timeouts. They ended up getting a 43-yard field goal out of that final drive of the first half, but you almost had a fumble by Cash Jones. A tip pass almost got picked off by one of Gunnar Stockton's passes got picked off by a Marshall player almost at the end of that. But they do get 3 points out of it. But, Mike, it is one of those things in these first couple of games, those kind of situational football moments are important to Kirby Smart to get right moving forward.
Yeah, Colby Young's the guy that's got to make this play. I mean, for a veteran player, that shouldn't happen. I mean, at some point, the lights got to come on, and you got to be a smart football team. And these are the plays that can get you beat. I mean, as you pointed out, Marshall had a player injured, and it saved Georgia a timeout. But these are the sorts of things that shouldn't be happening at this stage to a veteran player. If that's CJ Wiley over there, I feel a lot better about it. But this is a guy that's played a lot of football. And these are the sorts of things that Georgia has to get dialed into their players. One play, and Mark Richt said it in the offseason, one play can make a difference. For that matter, I think there were 3 drop passes in this game, and that puts them right on par with where they were last year.
Yeah, when Dylan Bell, that one pass hit right off him, you could hear the crowd kind of, and you hate it for Dylan because you just want all of that to live in the past. All right, I'll give you another injury update on our boots on the ground here. We heard a lot of talk about Brett Thorson. What's the deal with Brett Thorson? We hadn't seen him. Well, he was punting pregame. He was suited up and punting. And Kirby Smart told us as much. He had been punting a little bit. The thing he has not done, Brett Thorson, is get out there and cover on a punt, which is a very important part of a punt and how he injured himself in the first place. So we saw Drew Miller. He handled the punting. He had 6 punts, 48-yard average, had 1 touchback, which you ideally would not have wanted that one to roll in there. Had a 54-yarder as well, which is a career high. So we saw Drew Miller get out there, but Brett Thorson, for all the folks wondering what's the deal with Brett Thorson, there he was, kicking pregame. He was suited up.
Yeah, and I like this. And the reason I like it is that Brett Thorson has got more recovery time, and you're getting your next punter experience. I mean, I think probably part of the reason Drew Miller's still on campus is he's got some opportunities to punt this year. I mean, this is an elite punter, just like Brett, and he's not where Brett is in his career yet, but you're getting him some really valuable game reps, and you're buying more time for Brett Thorson to get even more healthy. As Kirby said, you see, he's punting just fine. But when you're talking about running down and trying to make tackles on punts, as Brett did last year, you want to give that knee as much time as possible, to be able to handle that torque and handle that movement and get him running comfortably and confidently. So again, Georgia's schedule worked out well for the Bulldogs this year.
Yeah, so boots on the ground, we're going to give you stuff like that because if you're watching this late into this show, you are an avid Georgia Bulldog fan, right? So you want to know what's going on with the second. That's why we're bringing you some of this stuff that, again, it's not going to get talked about on the ESPN broadcast because they're not interested in the punter injury situation, but something we can give you. Another moment that I thought was really cool that I did put out on Twitter this past weekend, and we had on our DawgNation site's YouTube channel as well. So if you follow that, you've seen this moment. But a really touching moment after the game, Kirby Smart goes over, gives Mary Beth the kiss and the hug. And then he kind of turns to his mother, Sharon. This first game without Sonny Smart on the sideline, Kirby said this preseason, it's about taking care of mom right now. And you could see how emotional this was, that he wanted to be there with her. First game since Sonny Smart tragically passed over the offseason. So really special moment for Kirby and his family afterwards.
Yeah, no doubt. And we've seen Mary Beth in a little bit more of a public role now. The kids are getting a little bit older. It's great to see her more involved and on the sideline and in the public eye. I mean, people forget she was also a fantastic athlete at the University of Georgia, and obviously a pretty strong personality. If you've seen Kirby interact with Mary Beth, you can't really tell who's in charge there, Cody. I mean, I got a feeling if anybody on this planet can handle Kirby Smart, it's his wife, Mary Beth.
I think one of the things that, too, resonates with everybody who watched that clip is everybody's had kind of those first, after you lose somebody, that first Christmas or that first whatever, and the first football game without the patriarch of that family, it's going to be something that's very emotional.
Oh, there's no question. To me, home openers are always special for several people that haven't seen each other, since the last football game in terms of the tailgating. I mean, there is such a sense of community when it comes to Georgia football at Sanford Stadium. It's such a beautiful stadium, and now you've got some expanded areas where people can congregate in addition to the incredible tailgating that takes place beforehand. So a bit of a family affair. And Cody, I know we're closing out the assessment of the team here before we get into the 30,000-foot view. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention how good Ryan Puglisi looked throwing those darts when he was afforded the opportunity to drive the team down the field. He even tucked it once and ran. That's not going to be a part of his game plan like it is for Gunner, but I feel a lot better about the backup quarterback situation after seeing the authority and the velocity that Ryan Puglisi was able to put on these passes. I mean, boom, there it is now. And to have that velocity, to have that certainty as a backup quarterback, I mean, I know he's got a lot to learn. I know he's not as comfortable in the offense or as knowledgeable about the offense as Gunner Stockton, but this guy has got a trigger. This guy can wing it. And if that situation should ever occur where he's pressed into action, I feel a lot better about it. Those were his first collegiate snaps. It was really big that he had the success that he did and showcased that golden arm.
And you got to show off one of my best shots of the day with the Elias Williams touchdown. So I appreciate it. That fits right in there with boots on the ground. Fun to show you a little bit of video right there. Mike teased it. We're going to go around the SEC, talk about what's going on. We do it with Mike's 30,000-foot view. All right, so let's take a look at, there's so much to talk about. I guess we can start with the folks in Alabama. Not a great weekend for all those Roll Tide people.
Yeah, tough loss for Alabama down at Florida State. Meanwhile, you see Justice Haynes up at Michigan tearing it up. You see Julian Sand, the starting quarterback for the Ohio State, tearing it up. These are former Alabama players, and it dawned on me, Cody, when I looked up, Nick Saban is still getting paid $500,000 a year by the University of Alabama to be an advisor. Maybe they ought to put that money into their players so that Ohio State's not able to come and get their best players in Michigan. The Big Ten is buying up Alabama players left and right. That would have made a difference. Alabama's starting running back was out for that Florida State game. Obviously, the quarterback they have in there right now, not as effective as Julian Sand appeared to be for the Ohio State. So I know a lot of people are coming down on Kalen DeBoer. There are some questions about the culture in that team under DeBoer and his management. But I think a lot of it still comes down to players. Caleb Downs now at Ohio State, another former Alabama great player. These are guys Georgia wanted that are at the Ohio State and the University of Michigan right now. Alabama's got to look at their funding. And quite frankly, if Nick Saban is playing the role of advisor, I'd love to know what he's advising him on. Should we hold him accountable for any of this, or does this just mean he plays nice when he talks about Alabama on game day?
He certainly did pick Alabama on game day. It was interesting. FSU finishes 230 rushing yards in their 31-17 win. Another viral clip. We talked about viral clips this week. Just some guys looking out there. They were loafing as FSU players running down. Nobody's taking great angles, and the guys just jogging.
Did you see the Florida State quarterback Thomas Castellanos has a T-shirt now that he's marketing through the NIL that Nick, he says something like Nick can't save him. Remember in the offseason he said that Nick Saban's not there to save him. So now this kid is turned around and he's got an NIL T-shirt and you just know it's going to get bought up. Not just at Florida State, but you better believe those Auburn fans are going to jump on that shirt too. It's Nick can't save him. And so this kid who put his neck on the line, talked up his team in the offseason. I was one of the people who said, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Well, guess what? He backed it up, and now he is cashing in on it. So get ready for that trend, Cody. We're going to see players making T-shirts up. It's coming. I don't know if we like it or not. But that NIL is real, and we're going to see that in practice in a lot of different places.
Yeah, good for him. A Georgia high school football product, of course, Thomas Castellanos. All right, Texas, Ohio State. Everybody was watching that one. 14-7, Ohio State gets the win. Arch finishes 17-30, 170 yards, had a touchdown, an interception, and a QBR of 58.
Yeah, didn't get a lot of help from his teammates, and Steve Sarkisian, their catchphrase is all gas, no brakes. It looked like all brakes and no gas. Probably gave Texas fans gas watching that offense. They were 1 of 5 on fourth down conversions, Cody. And I thought the biggest one was in the third quarter. It's a 4th and 1. They're down 7-0 with about 5.5 minutes left. Arch goes to the line. There are 4 Ohio State guys over the center. Now, Arch is not coming out of Wilson Junior High here. This is a quarterback read. He's got to have the power to change this play or the confidence to call the timeout, or the coaches have to see this. This was a real failing by the Texas coaching staff. Now, these are 2 high payroll teams breaking in new quarterbacks, relatively new quarterbacks. At the end of the day, I thought it was coaching malpractice by Ryan Day and Steve Sarkisian, both of them going for 4th downs early when they could have punted and flipped the field. I said, oh my goodness, Kirby Smart would have never done that. So there's a reason why Kirby's the best. Sometimes these egotistical coaches get a little carried away with themselves. Shades of Ohio State losing to Michigan last year, insisting on pounding the ball when there were many other ways they could have won. So this helps Georgia. To me, I know that when the polls come out, you're going to see Ohio State likely number 1, possibly number 2, depending on how bullish people are on Penn State. But I tend to think Ohio State will be number 1. I don't think Texas is going to fall beyond 5. And the reason why is I don't think you penalize teams for playing these sorts of road games. I don't think you drop them that much. Otherwise, you're going to discourage this. Let's set an example for the College Football Playoff Selection Committee here. But I'm glad they played the game. Texas learned a lot. I believe they have a pretty soft schedule to do a lot of repair work and try and get Arch Manning's psyche where it needs to be, because that's a talented guy that looked like he was holding back. Didn't really look fearless putting the ball downfield. Not like I thought he would, Cody.
Yeah, really interesting. And for Georgia fans, what does it mean that Alabama and Texas loses? I think back to Alabama last year, how different they can look week to week. It don't mean anything for September 28th.
Well, especially when you consider that their running back is going to be back for that game, and there's a chance their starting defensive tackle will be back as well. They were missing some key guys. The defensive tackle had tightrope surgery, and that 6-week window is going to be pretty close with the Georgia game. If he's back, he probably won't be 100%. Jam Miller, the starting tailback, though, he had a collarbone. I don't know the extent of it, but they said he would be on track to be back for Georgia. So I don't think you're going to see the same Alabama. I've got to think they're going to get better, just like Georgia's going to get better between now and then. But obviously, I think it raises the stakes. Alabama now a much more desperate team. They don't have the benefit of another mulligan unless they were to win the SEC title. I don't think you get in with 3 losses if you're Alabama and you don't play in the SEC championship game.
All right, because Saturday is the way it is with Georgia's schedule, I got to watch very little live football on Saturday. I got to watch the fourth quarter LSU at Clemson by the time I got home and see the end of that. But LSU finally gets a week 1 win, and they win 17-10 at the other Death Valley. Cade Klubnik could not lead his team to victory for Clemson. What were your takeaways from that one, Tiger and Tiger?
Well, Clemson lost their best receiver in the first quarter, and we know from experience when teams lose their top target in game, it's very difficult because a lot of the game is schemed around that player. So Dabo and his team were scrambling. I thought Dabo and Clemson did a good job staying in that game. I thought LSU was clearly the better team. I'd go so far as to say right now LSU is probably the favorite to be across the line of scrimmage from Georgia in the SEC championship game. That was a big program win for LSU. Whit Weeks, a local guy from right around here in Athens. That guy brings fire, passion, and energy. He brings a presence to those LSU Tigers that defense didn't have last year. And the way they won it with a 4th down stop backed up to their own 16-yard line, that is a big play, big moment for an LSU defense that was hurt last year. Harold Perkins with the pressure there on 4th down, a very familiar name, a guy that was injured last year. Now he's healthy again. LSU appears to have all the pieces in place if they can keep Nussmeier healthy. This is going to be a very dangerous football team. Wouldn't shock me at all. Again, if they're playing in the SEC championship game opposite Georgia, Brian Kelly looks like he's put it together.
All right, anything else for as we finish up your 30,000-foot view? Had South Carolina over Virginia Tech, Tennessee over Syracuse. Friday we saw Auburn beat Baylor. What else stuck out to you from the rest of the SEC this week?
Yeah, Tennessee, their quarterback, there were a lot of questions about their new quarterback after Nico went to UCLA. He looked really good running that offense. He's not afraid to put the ball downfield. That's going to put pressure on Georgia if they're not able to get a pass rush. Now, again, we didn't talk much about Georgia in the opening segment, Cody, because we know that Glenn Schumann has some diabolical things drawn up. The mad scientist has some things that he is not going to turn loose until they go to Rocky Top. There are some pressure packages that Georgia is going to spring on the Tennessee Vols, and the quarterback must go down and must create havoc. They did not have a sack against Marshall, okay? They're going to have sacks against Tennessee. The question is the resiliency factor for Tennessee and their ability to run the football into the Georgia front. I'm not convinced that Tennessee can run the ball effectively. Conversely, Tennessee has a very good defense. I'm not convinced that Gunnar Stockton can run with the same efficiency against the Tennessee defense that he did against the Marshall Thundering Herd. So both of these programs need to take steps in the next few weeks leading up to that pivotal matchup, and it's going to be a big one because Tennessee is playing with a lot of confidence right now. They have a lot of newness, and they have some success to build on after that neutral site win over Syracuse. Hugh Freeze and Auburn, that was a big one. To get that kind of win and for Jackson Arnold to play the way that he did, Auburn could be a problem this year.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Kirby Smart, if you ask him directly, did you watch that game last night? He'll always tell you no, he didn't watch. He was focused on getting ready for Marshall. But in his post-game press conference, they asked him about Gunnar Stockton running the football and why is that important. He goes, running the football as a quarterback, when you have a quarterback and run, that's huge. Look at what Auburn did last night. Look at what Georgia Tech did last night. Jackson Arnold, 137 rushing yards. Of course, Haynes King with basically the walk-off for Georgia Tech. You better believe his eyes were on those games. He knew exactly what had happened in those games.
Well, like Kirby says, we're not practicing to win one game. We're practicing to win all of them. And he's very well aware of what's ahead on the schedule. Up next is Austin P. This is a team. Now, it is an FCS team, and this is another walkover win for Georgia, but it is worth noting they did beat Middle Tennessee State, an FBS team, and that is that program's first win over an FBS program since 1987. So for what it's worth, Austin P is going to come in here with some momentum. That's good. You want a good opponent to spar with when you're the champ. You want a team that's going to come in here that's going to bring an air of confidence, that's going to have some success. It's going to create, some matchups for Georgia to take a look at. Again, I'm not going to make more of it than it is, but better than a team that got beat 75-0. You're going to have a team that's going to come in here and fight and test your guys, and that is what you want for Kirby Smart, is you want a live sparring partner. And Austin P will come in here ready to spar, puffing their chest out, coming off what is a huge win for their program. They're going to try to represent themselves well, just like Marshall did. And Georgia, meanwhile, is going to be working on fixing some things and working on some new things as they get 1 week closer to that titanic matchup against the Tennessee Vols on the banks of the Tennessee River, where, of course, we're going to be on our riverboat that day tailgating pregame.
Yeah, looking forward to having our DawgNation invasion on the Tennessee River this year. And on that boat that day, we will have our DawgNation game day show with Kaylee Mansell. She'll be doing it live from the boat. I want to encourage you, if that's not a part of your game day schedule, make that a part of your game day schedule. Kaylee going live 2 hours before kickoff. At home game, she is live from Jittery Joe's in downtown Athens. You can also stop by and say hello to her if you want to do that. But want to encourage you to watch that. That's a DawgNation game day show. Also our DawgNation post game show with Brandon Adams wrapping up at the bookstore. He had a bunch of guests come through on Saturday night. Love talking dogs there. So if you be sure to make that a part of your game day each and every week. And you can do that by subscribing to our DawgNation YouTube channel. Also turn on your notifications. So if you are tailgating or if you're watching another game, have Kaylee on that second screen experience, getting you ready for the Dogs and the Governors this week as Georgia takes on Austin P.
One more plug, Cody, if I may interrupt. Kaylee Mansell also doing the DawgNation live blog during the game. So if you can't get enough of Kaylee on video, she does a live blog in the game where she's going to keep you up to date with the scoring. She's going to interject some of her thoughts and observations, injury reports, as well as some of those cool Twitter videos of highlights of plays that maybe you missed. So you get Kaylee Mansell on video, and now we've got her on our content team working our live blogs on Saturday. All Kaylee all the time on game day.
Yeah, she's so quick-witted and so good at that kind of stuff. So be sure to follow her with all of that. All right, we're going to wrap up our show today. And this is not something we're going to do every week. We are not going to do this every week. It's not going to be a looking over the fence at somebody else. No, but we will do it this week because it was a nationally televised game for our old friend Carson Beck as he and Miami took on Notre Dame and Carson got the win. So we're not going to do the Carson recap. It's not a new segment of our show. But it is interesting this week to watch him for the very first time in a different uniform. It was strange. He's back in actually his high school colors playing down there at Mandarin High School in Jacksonville. But they get the 27-24 win. He was 20 of 31, 205 yards, a couple touchdowns. One incredible one-handed catch right before halftime there. What'd you think about Carson and his debut for Miami?
Well, I'm going to start out with a statement that some people might find controversial, but I don't think it is. This is a win for Georgia. This is a guy who was in the Georgia program for 5 years. This is a guy who played 3 years as a backup and waited his turn. And I know that things didn't end up perfect. We're well aware of that. We all witnessed Carson's growing pains via the social media channels. And Mario Cristobal saw that too and said, you know what? Repetition. Carson learned from that. He's focused now. This is a young man who has grown into a poised leader. Miami does not win that football game with Cam Ward, in my opinion. You saw how Cam Ward did not win in the clutch against Syracuse with the season on the line. Guess what? Carson Beck's been there. He's won these sorts of games. He understands what it is to be poised. He understands what it is to show passion in the clutch. We saw Carson turn it around for the Georgia Bulldogs, down 10-0 against Tennessee last year when he lowered his shoulder and ran over a Tennessee defensive back, and the Georgia offense erupted in a comeback victory that launched them into the SEC championship game. We saw Carson in the fourth quarter lead a tremendous comeback against Georgia Tech in a game that was all but lost. He had to execute. Yes, Dan Jackson forced the fumble, but the ball still had to get in the end zone, and Georgia had to go 8 overtimes, and Carson Beck had to respond and not make the mistake. We saw Carson Beck come off the sideline with one arm and execute an effective handoff after taking the snap as ETN went into the end zone. Carson Beck is a big part of Georgia history, and he is a Georgia Bulldog. He has his degree from here. He said he will always be a Bulldog. He's given thanks to the fans and to Kirby Smart. He has Georgia's blessings. He's done more for the university than 99.5% of the fan base. So I don't understand why some people have a hard time rooting for Carson. I think we're in a new day and age now when players transfer, just like the NFL. Guys are going to go where there's opportunities. And yes, Miami did offer more money, but it was about more than that, Cody. Jim Nagy's told us these NFL teams like to see guys operate different offenses, work in different systems, because that's what they're going to have to do in the NFL. They have to transition successfully. Okay, Carson Beck grew up at the University of Georgia, and he will forever represent the University of Georgia. Now, he may finish his career at Miami with one season, but Georgia fans got 5 years of watching this guy grow up right before their eyes. And like Carson said, there was good, bad, and ugly. He said it in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution story. You can check it out. I was a me guy. I can admit that. He realized he had to grow up and be team first. And that happened for him last season when he struggled in October and turned it around in that Tennessee game and helped the Bulldogs get to the SEC title game.
Yeah, one of the things it did really, again, I didn't know how I was going to feel watching him for the first time. And as I'm watching him, I do get that sense of like, yeah, you learned that. Georgia taught you that. Yeah. The end of the first half, they're doing their 2-minute drill. We showed the video of Kirby Smart getting on Colby Young. Hey, you got to do it this way, right? So Carson Beck is in his guy's face. Yeah, you've got to get on the line. You've got to get set. We're trying to make a play here. And he's doing the exact same thing that Kirby Smart was doing to Colby Young. It definitely felt like a Carson Beck last night who didn't need to get his arm. Kirby didn't need to put his arm around and coddle him. He seemed like a whole different kind of like much stronger guy than what we remember some of those times being where he just kind of shrunk down a little bit after throwing interceptions.
Well, let's face it, it's different when the new boss comes in as the new boss versus when the guy's just been one of the guys for so long and now all of a sudden he's in charge. It's hard for that dynamic in the locker room to change when you're used to a guy being a backup that maybe wasn't all in early, as was the case with Stetson. Stetson even told you it's so much easier to prepare and be dialed in when you're the starter. You got to see Carson grow. It's too bad he didn't get his own national title. It's too bad that after winning 29 straight games, Georgia loses one game by a field goal and doesn't get in the playoff, when a couple years before they lose by 17 points in the SEC championship game and still make it and win the title. That playoff is kind of a strange and funny thing. I feel like Carson should have got his own title ring. He does have title rings from being on the team, but he was capable. It's too bad he didn't have Brock Bowers to throw to last year. It's too bad James Cook didn't have a couple more years. So he didn't have the marquee number one defense. He didn't play with a defense with 7 first-round picks. His final year at Georgia, he did not have the supporting cast, and still he kept Georgia as a championship caliber contender. And yes, he could have done a better job in certain areas. I think he realizes that. I think he grew from that. He put Georgia into the SEC title game. Gunner was able to come in and finish the job after Carson was hurt. He did his job to the extent that he could. So I feel like that Carson did what he could at Georgia. I feel like that overall there is good, bad, and ugly, but I think it's a success story. And as Mark Richt said, he's a guy that Georgia fans should root for because he was a part of Georgia, just like Mark Richt was when he went back to his alma mater to coach. So, college sports it's a funny game now with these guys transferring, and do you follow their careers and do you still root for them? I think this is something a little different, but as we go along, I think we're going to become accustomed to this and kind of judge these guys and appreciate them for what they did while they were on this campus.
Yeah, I think the biggest what if is what if the expanded playoff had happened a year earlier. Georgia doesn't need to go whoop on FSU. They're actually in the playoff doing that as well. Carson will get Florida coming up on the 20th of September, so we'll see how he does against them. All right, so Mike, I do feel like the start of this show, we were tough on the Dogs today, right? And that's okay because you talked about the standard. So let's go the other way. What was your favorite thing? What's your favorite thing about Saturday? It doesn't have to be necessarily on the field, but just overall.
Well, I mean, I got to say Zachariah Branch. I mean, it's great to see the human joystick out there. I mean, this guy just is so quick and elusive, and he's going to be able to make plays. He's going to be a go-to guy. I'm going to stand behind my prediction that he'll have a 1,000-yard receiving season, barring an injury. Loved seeing that. Loved seeing some things out of Chris Cole. Didn't get to see a lot of them, but when he was in there, you could definitely see the speed, the quickness, the bend, the power. You've got some dynamic players. Excited. For the other branch, Zion Branch, to see a guy get 7 tackles in 12 plays. I mean, that's the kind of thing you want to see. You want to see somebody emerge back there. I thought the Georgia corners were very sticky as well. Didn't see a lot of, Dalen Everett. I think he was the guy, I think he was the guy that actually might have, had something happen at practice and as it turned out. But Kirby didn't say a whole lot about that. But I thought the cornerback play was very good from Ellis Robinson as well as Daniel Harris. I was encouraged by that. I guess one of the things I would have liked to have seen is it was a beautiful day, and I know there was a lot to do in Georgia. I wish maybe more students would have been there. This is an SEC championship team. Don't get too spoiled. There's a lot of people, if you're not going to go to the game, give your tickets to somebody else. Georgia's a team that's worthy of a full stadium for 4 quarters. I think that won't be a problem when the SEC teams come in here, but what a privilege it is to be at Sanford Stadium in this era of Kirby Smart football. This is something that I think people are going to be telling their grandkids about someday.
Yeah, there are precious few Saturdays in Athens. You got to take advantage of each and every one. Kirby bit his tongue a little bit on all of that, but you could tell it annoyed him too. All right, that's a full show of On the Beat now that we are back in the season. Appreciate Ingles being a part of the show. Mike, it's great talking ball with you. Maybe we'll do it next week in Athens one more time. We'll see you next Monday night right here on The Beat.